Today's guest is Mike Privette, cybersecurity economist and the founder of the Return on Security, where thousands of industry leaders track the funding rounds, M&A trends, and the shifting economy of our security and AI field. So in our conversation, we're going to cover a lot of ground. We're going to talk about the real impact of generative AI, its moment it's having with DLP, some of the governance blind spots that are being created, frameworks for CISOs to help navigate this risk that we have going on. So to help explore also what it means to lead with trust over control, certainly for those people who are in the cybersecurity vendor space as well. And you like that first security hire. So I'm really looking forward to talk about that. So Mike, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
So mate, let's just start right there. You've been talking about, we've got a lot we're going to talk about on the big picture of the AI security economy, the AI economy. But I also just want to start, like you recently wrote in your news article and your newsletter about what does it mean to be the first security hire? And the reason I wanted to bring that up is because it has this, you really anchored and focused the conversation on, you are like this business unit that happens to do security.
Yeah.
And the outcome of that business unit is these things like trust, something that's pretty near and dear to my heart and how I'm thinking about it. So why don't you just take us back to some of the talks you've given around that and some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the talk idea came up after I talked to a lot of different people who were either aspiring to be the first CISO at a company, whether it's a startup or not, or they're trying to determine, what does a good first security leader look like? And then I had a lot of trial and error on my own consulting, where I would talk to a founder and they would say, here's what they expect. And that would be wildly different than what I thought it was supposed to be. And I'm like, we're not ever going to match. And so I was like, hey, I should probably talk about what it actually means to be this. I was the first security hire at a FinTech in the US for a couple years. And it was a really good orientation and kind of trial by fire of what it meant to be the first leader. And it was an interesting world where I realized you had to swing dynamically between very low level detail, technical details, talk to DevOps and engineers and AppSec teams, and then also go ask money for your board and then convince them why, hey, now you have to spend new money. Like, I know you didn't have this plan in your budget, but now I need you to have new money for this new thing. Here's why it's important. And that's a really hard transition to make, especially to be able to bubble it up. And so I said, I should put a talk together about what it actually means, and what more specifically what it does not mean to do this. I think that's a really big piece. And it was super well received. I gave a talk at B-Sides SF this past year, and I got a lot of good feedback. A lot of people saying, hey, I'm in the same spot, and it's not always fun as I thought it would be. That was kind of like the genesis of it. Like, hey, let me write this down. And I kind of have a personal philosophy on writing and note taking. And if I get asked about it more than a few times, I have to write about it, because otherwise, I won't be able to keep it straight in my head. I'm like, I need to write this down and then publish it, so that way the ideas can live. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. That's actually a pretty decent rule to live by. Can I just have one follow-up question on that, which is, so security, what's kind of a winning strategy here? Because one of the things I'm seeing is you have a lot of technology companies and they're trying to bring something to market. Not even technology companies, companies in general bring something to market. And security can be, well, great, we're going to achieve this compliance requirement such that we can get into this market.
Yep.
But that's kind of an old, that's been around for a decade, 15 years. That's been a thing. But then there's the other idea of now that we're rebuilding our businesses, we're going from old tech, we're bringing to agentic solutions, we're replatforming how we do our business processes. Love to get your thoughts more around the trust side of that. It's like you have these concepts of security, still got to make sure the environment's free of an adversary. Right. Safety, it's working well within the parameters, is working as expected when the parameters you're given it. Reliability, it's there where you need it most, even under adversarial circumstances like an outage or something like that.
Right.
For first-time security leaders or security leaders who are just trying to have a larger positive impact in their organization, love to get your perspective on that, and then we can get to the economics of it.
Yeah, well, so it's not an easy task to do all that, I'll say. One of the ways I found that's helpful in this matter is to kind of focus on what is true regardless of you being there or not. So what's true is your customers expect things. They will tell you quickly whether or not you meet those things. You are regulated by the field you're in, like maybe you process credit card data. PCI says you have to do certain things. And then there are things that maybe help you get into new markets, or help you achieve that higher enterprise customer tier. So you must be this tall to ride the ride. Now I always kind of look at those things as those things have to be done no matter what, whether I think they're a good thing or not, whether the company thinks they're a good thing or not. If you want to achieve these things, you have to kind of go that direction. And so I always kind of look at like, what do the customers want? What do we promise them? Which is often very scary. And then what is true, which is actually the hardest part to reconcile, or rather like what's true right now. And then that's kind of how you can back into a roadmap of saying like, all right, how do I either make true what we promised or make true what the customers expect or what they're asking for? Then you kind of use that to break it down into like this big like kind of untenable body of work into roadmap. And then a roadmap can drive what capabilities you have, and then what protections you could put in place based on, the kind of the risk profile of your company. But those are a little more practical in nature. They're not like, I'd love to spend millions of dollars on a SOC and do all this really cool stuff. But you're a 200-person company, so you're probably not going to build your own SOC. Yeah. Okay, so maybe I should think of another way to like achieve these outcomes by not hiring hundreds of people or whatever that you might expect at a large company. And so you kind of back in like, all right, what is kind of like minimum viable security product on this? What can I actually deliver? What can I get budget and funding for? That's a big difference. And then, but I also like to have conversations early on, especially with the founders, like, hey, security cannot be just me and a laptop, like just blasting away, running scripts. Like it can be part of that, but it can't be only that. And so like, this is not what you're hiring for. And so to be honest, a large part of it's level setting and understanding like, helping people understand what it is that they're getting versus what they're expecting and closing that gap.
Do you anticipate that as AI economy and this next generation grows, that a lot of companies I know it's not what is supposed to be the contract of hiring a CISO. Do you see a lot of expectations of one-man security teams?
Yeah, I think at least to start, and honestly, this has been around for quite a while that you expect to start nimble. And to be honest, these early companies, they kind of expect a unicorn of sorts, a person who can write code and who can speak to a board, every month. And that's a pretty wide gap for a lot of people, especially if you're the first time. And then especially if you don't know how much experience the executives of like the board has with cyber and what they're going to ask and what they care about. So that is tricky, but people, I will say, people are expecting you to do more with tech if you can. Yeah. And hiring is kind of the last resort on security until, and hiring for business or like developers, hiring for like customer service, things that move the business forward in a easier to understand, money in, money out kind of way is a lot easier conversation. So, but then you can typically make budget for tools, which is nice. But then it comes down to like, all right, what can I do? How do I maximize the time spent?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And that's a good transition point, I think, to talk about tools, the cybersecurity economy, and a lot of these tools that you follow. I think a lot of our millions of listeners, I would assume and hope, know you from your newsletter, which is Return on Security. Talk about a lot about the funding rounds and M&A. First of all, you have a definition. Talk to us about the cybersecurity economy.
Yeah. Well, so cybersecurity economy is made up of many different things. It's not just the funding and the flashy like M&A rounds you see, although those are probably like the most exciting, especially like, last week and this week, there's going to be dozens of them. Right. So that obviously that's a very big piece of it. So there's the investment side of the cybersecurity economy. There is the government side of it in terms of like, what is the government's response to national defense and to like the country level cyber threat intelligence sharing and all that. Then there is the business and regulatory landscape. So in your country or in your region, like what are the requirements like to do business from a privacy standpoint, from a cyber standpoint? Every country has different ones, and some of them supersede others and stack. And then that kind of determines how hard is it to do business there. And not just for cyber companies, but also that then attracts companies to then solve that gap and like, oh, you have to be compliant on this cyber certification in this part of the world. Somebody needs to make a business to help other businesses get to that point as well. And then you also have the labor market. So like, it's not just people who are being recruited to work at cyber companies, but it's also people who are doing cyber jobs at other companies outside of cyber. And then you have the community aspect of it, part of which is stuff like this. So we're doing, podcasts, being at conferences, giving talks at local things, even like the small dinners in cities and just like the informal WhatsApp and Slack groups, like all of those things, like those kind of 5 pillars form what I call the cybersecurity economy. and they have to all work kind of in unison, and it's very symbiotic. And the output of that is increased like defense, like kind of broadly speaking, and that's something I think a lot of people don't always think about, especially if we're leaning more on the tools. They're like, all right, you think about the investors and the companies and doing exits and making money.
Yeah.
All of which are important things, because companies who exit, they create angel investors and they create new companies, and it's a fulfilling ecosystem if you do it right. And if you zoom out and kind of look at parts of the world where some of those parts are a bit more deficient, like it's maybe too hard to do business in some geographies, you can see people flock there. There's not a startup scene. There's not an early stage investor scene. You just have a low level of like kind of innovation in that space. And then the other parts also start to suffer as well. So they begin to overregulate and to try to latch on to what they have.
See this, you live in Europe, right? You live in London. So there is a lot of conversations around the regulations and the speed to doing business in the US versus the UK. That's probably something you've seen firsthand.
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely is. And there's definitely some cultural things as well too, in terms of like entrepreneurship is celebrated differently. But I don't want to rush to say that the U.S. way is the best way, because with unbridled capitalism, you get the highs and you get the lows.
Capitalism.
So you can't have both. Yeah, yes. You can't pick and choose that easily. So like you have to do it kind of in a smarter way. There are certain areas that will be deficient. But then when you have such a gigantic market as the U.S. That has so many buyers, it's hard to ignore that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you put out these 5 pillars, right, for the cybersecurity economy. And it's got me thinking a little bit. It's like, as we hear people talking about the national defense of a nation, it's like, where does cybersecurity show up in your national defense strategy? And then you can now, based on that framework, you could say like, are we allowing the M&A to happen in our economy? Because that would have a direct influence on the national security. So like the national security from a cyber perspective isn't limited to just what's coming out of DARPA or what's coming out of so it's really good, interesting framework to like explore, because I could see there's gonna be a lot of secondary and third degree implications when you start using this framework. And they're like, oh, you actually want an environment that lets M&A happen. You actually want an environment where you're putting out maybe the entrepreneurial side or not, but you want to have people where you have a community. So I think a strong community aspect, and you could basically start feeding this cycle at different points and kind of help build the economy up a little, the cybersecurity economy.
And I would love to know, obviously the last 2 years have been insane, right? With the introduction of AI technologies. Off the back of that, if we talk about the cybersecurity economy, this week, the amount of funding rounds, like how has that changed the cybersecurity economy as a whole?
Oh, it's changed hugely. So, AI security drives probably most of the investments these days, like early stage that is. But I would say, so 2 years ago, AI and security hit the scene collectively, and nobody knew what it was. Everything was an AI security company. And then as the years went on, people started to realize like, well, maybe you're a security for AI company, as opposed to an AI for security company. And now there's a few that are maybe you're security from AI, like deep fact detection, disinformation, things like that. And then people are starting to kind of segment and realize like, well, you're more of an AI enabled insert product. Maybe you do a better job at DLP or a better job at email security because you use AI in your products or in your workflows now, or you have an agent now. So there's been a lot more, I would say, crystallization of that market. But there's been a huge amount of investment too. So, every year I do an annual report where I kind of just look back. It takes me like hundreds of hours to write. I don't know that anybody reads it because it's like an hour to read.
I read it. I definitely read it.
Thank you. It is intense. But I kind of track all that over time. What is it doing? In every facet of the cybersecurity economy, I try to capture. And the first year that AI and security kind of came out on the scene, it was very little investment, maybe like less than 0.5% of the overall population of funding for like a given cybersecurity year. And then the next year, it more than doubled because we started understanding it a bit more, being able to classify it a bit more. Companies were not just the one-trick pony anymore. They weren't just a SecOps agent on top of everything. And not that that's bad, but that was kind of the only thing at first. Yeah, and now there are many other iterations of it. And so like it's already like tripled again this year. Like it's already
really
it's already way up there. this year's, I mean, funding so far this year, as of today, has almost surpassed last year already. So it's like,
Because it wasn't like
overall
14 billion last year.
14 billion, yeah. And it was just as of last week, it was just like 13.5 billion.
Great. And that
It's-
we're only halfway through the, or yeah, a little through the year.
Yeah.
Goodness me, like
Black
that,
Hat's not even over yet. So
No,
it'll probably
there's
be
gonna be a
14 by
bunch
the end of
this
the
week.
a lot's going down to Mandalay Bay this week.
Yeah.
Yes. So what do you think the implications? What are the second order effects of that? Are we going to see a hype bubble, and is it going to pop, or is it like, no, like the value of the technology is here. We're in the middle of rebuilding. We're in the next industrial revolution.
Yeah.
So we're actually small potatoes. Like we're early days in this.
Yeah, so I think we're early days. I do not think it's the bubble in the classic sense. It's like not like the .com bubble. I think it is huge. It's inflated and overhyped to a point, but it's also very real. I mean, if you just look at some of the cost savings and time savings people are getting now from some of these tools, and the way they can do so much more with AI for security or with security, it's amazing. And we'll never go back. Like we'll never go back to that world.
There's no world
Cat's out
where
the bag.
Yeah. And now, but what's also interesting is like the rest of the world is doing this too. It's been bigger than the rise of the mobile phone. It's been bigger than probably the rise of the internet's probably the closest corollary to it. Way bigger than cloud computing, because now it's like every business everywhere across every industry and product, vertical or group has a mandate do more with AI. And so like because of that means security will always have to be there.
Yeah.
And so it's actually going to increase demand across the board for more AI, more security with all these AI tools.
Do you think CISOs do they have the tools, and are they being given enough? And B, do you think they're ready for what is about to be? I mean, there was a huge enough load on the proverbial back of the CISO before. Do you think it's going to be do you think the CISOs are ready for this?
I think they're getting more ready now. So the first year, I would say most of them just like panicked and said, let's throw the legal hammer down and say, don't use AI or you're fired.
Yep.
And companies kind of needed to do that because people were just shoving anything and everything into there. And truly, they probably still are in a lot of ways. But now there's ways to catch that if you just, check out Black Hat. But that was the only tool they had. It was like, we can't stop this. We don't know what to do. It was kind of like the growth of remote work. We're like, people have to be at home now. We have to adapt. There's no other way to change this. I can't force everybody in an office through a proxy. And so now I would say people are, the security leaders have gotten a lot better at it. They're now being pushed by their business and IT teams to go faster. They're like, hey, we already have to do this. We have a whole mandate to roll out AI across the company. Security, you have to be there. And there's still some cases too where they'll say, hey, we're already live. You have to pen test this, which is why there's been a huge explosion in the AI red teaming market.
Yes.
Because that's like the tip of the spear. Like that is like a business application that is potentially making money or about to make money that has to be checked.
Yeah.
And pen testing an AI application is slightly different than a web app.
100%. And so when we red teaming it, because you now have a system which is operating based on incentives.
Yeah.
And if a good red teaming team will know not to go after the technology, but will learn to like the technology and the infrastructure there, sure, you're going to find vulnerabilities. You can go after it.
Yeah.
But it's really, can you get the intelligence that has action to do something? So we've basically taken all of this 15 years of learning how to compromise a human being through phishing, and you get to take all of those toolkits and put them just there, and we call it prompt injection.
Yeah.
Right. And you get to, let's say, okay, how do you go trick that intelligence, which was human? Now we get to choose this other intelligence.
Yeah. And I think it's amazing. And because of that, people are getting more budget for that. They're, hey, like we have to do this. I think security teams are also realizing they can do a lot more themselves too. Like, hey, like we could never write all these detection rules ourselves. Mm-hmm. Now we can write them in minutes, for, across our whole stack. A lot of the technology they have are making it easy to do it. So people, a lot of the product companies are rolling out AI enabled features that help with that stuff to help them go faster and kind of like, the classic case of like, you never actually realize the true value of the products you buy because you don't have enough time, people, or a budget. And there's always
shelfware is a big problem. Yeah.
You can get part of it, but like, I think you'll get a lot closer to that true maximization of like features and parity and all that stuff that you kind of buy into when you go with the vendor. I think we'll be able to get closer there, and that's just kind of the feeling like, that we have been behind for so long. Let's hurry up as security people, use AI as quickly as possible to make up lost time and close these gaps, and then start doing like the new stuff.
And that leads me to a good question as well, which is like, what is the like how does security roles within CISO orgs and enterprises evolve as we get access to this technology?
I think the AI governance role is going to be really big.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows what that means,
Nope.
and it collides with AI safety. And the bigger the company, the more committees and the more governance boards and all that stuff. And that's not a bad thing, but it's the more hands will be in the proverbial like pot to that you have to talk through all the use cases on. So I think that'll be more important of having that kind of like governance lead. It was kind of similar to the moment where privacy started becoming a security problem as well, and not just a legal problem. Yeah. And then security teams had to kind of wake up to like the data privacy regulations and actual consent management and those things. And but that was more like a facilitation of a business process and it's very similar. I think AI is going to have that same kind of moment. So you have to have people who are good at those things, good at governance. Obviously, the red teamers, if you have those, will have to become more adept at using and doing that stuff, which I think, many are like rushing to learn as much as they can on that front. You'll still need good security engineers and architects like to do this, the system designs. They'll just have to increase like what their understanding of the scope, which will be aided by AI in a lot of ways. And there's some really interesting companies who are doing like AI kind of threat modeling and like early stage design. So I don't know that I don't know that there'll ever be like an AI security like role per se. That's like all they do. It's probably more like, well, you're already an engineer. Other duties as assigned are go figure out AI for the company.
Right.
And it's like, that's just like something else you do. But truly, I see the same thing happening in the product market. Like, I don't think, except for maybe one or two caveats, there will be a totally unique AI security market. That's not.
I think that's a really interesting idea. Like, I do think the other duties as assigned probably is the slogan of the cybersecurity leadership a sector. It's like, because we do get so much. One of the thoughts I've been having is this idea. You mentioned with the privacy piece, like when that came out in the US, we had CCPA and we had CCPR. Yep. GDPR came out first as it came out. And you started to have legal teams say, okay, we need to get our hands around this. Well, it was the security team that was having their one-on-ones with the general counsel and with the VP of engineering and the head of data. And so they were already in the middle of this nexus.
Yep.
I do wonder if the CISO, if the head of security is going to find themselves in that same spot where they're already talking to engineering, product, legal, the board, the audit committees, and they're like, oh, by the way, here's another technical expression of risk. So therefore, we're going to ask you, CISO, have his opinions. I have this observation that CISOs have this dual mandate, both to rebuild their teams with AI inside their security operations, rebuild vulnerability management, patch management, all these things with AI agentic capabilities.
Right.
And at the same time, make sure the management team is aware of the risks that they're carrying, make sure the product team is aware of the risks in the product, bring in that red team you're discussing about there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I agree with all that too. And I do think that'll become more important. And they're especially going to be the ones who say like, security always love to pretend like they'd love to be like the go, no go decision on like real business things. And like, business will stiff arm you real quick if there's a real, actual transaction.
It's like a legal, like the CEO goes to the general counsel and says like, help me understand what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
I'm still making the decision.
Yeah.
Right.
The general counsel doesn't make the decision.
That's
They
right.
inform the rest of the management team, here are the risks and options.
Yeah.
I think a good effective CISO does the same thing. We bring in risks, we bring in options.
Yeah, totally. And I think because of that, the CISO, the security leaders are going to get even closer with the general counsel too, because it all comes down to risk and indemnification of risk. And like, what's my legal liability that my customers accept or allow, or that I can get away with, or as a business? And then what's like versus like, how do we enable the businesses to use these things quickly? And so it's been a really interesting phenomenon to see now that like teams outside of cyber are driving AI cyber like kind of adoption, because they're like, hey, we want to use this thing really quick. Can you just tell us the right way to do this, or the safe way to do this, or can you put something in place that allows us to use this thing that unlocks untold like business value? So that's a really cool phenomenon, I would say. Then it seems like, I'm sure it's not true everywhere, but it seems like people have learned a bit of their lessons from the cloud days of that front. So like, let's do it early. And I think security's leaning way further into this than they did on many of the other technical.
Do you see a lot of synergies between, again, I don't think we're at the scale of, or even close, but like that cloud adoption and, hey, like we don't have to worry about security anymore. Are you seeing a lot of the synergies in the CISO community of folks saying, okay, well, it used to be that AWS and Microsoft have our back now, and now they're trusting other LLMs. Are you seeing that within the community too?
Yeah, and people still expect a lot of the cloud providers as well. And the bigger the company, the more they're going to lean on those big ones. So like, hey, let's just make sure we're all in on the Microsoft ChatGPT Enterprise platform, because that's where all of our eggs are already in that basket.
Yeah.
They're the best ones to handle it. So there's that. But then security's always been a game of like, or like a world of like trade-offs where like I need just enough coverage here and I need really good coverage here, and that's always kind of a spectrum. And people always talk about consolidation of the industry and whatnot, and like, oh, it's finally happened. All these roll-ups. Palo Alto bought CyberArk. It's finally happening, and I'm like, that's just iterations of the same thing over and over again, and I always attribute it. It's like an accordion. Like as you squeeze like one part of it, and I don't know how to play an accordion, so this is totally theoretical.
I was like, yeah.
But no, when you see people like squeeze it, the consolidation happens, and then what pops out the top? Lots of new startups.
Yeah,
lots of new things that come out, and so like there will always be this undulating kind of like tension between consolidation, best of breed, over and over again. That'll never go away, and I don't think we want it to go away, to be honest, because I can't imagine one vendor doing like everything well.
Microsoft's going to try.
Yeah,
they won't do it well.
Many will try.
So tell us a little bit more about that. You gave us some really good headlines, kind of good framing of the market, right? So we saw, it was a $14 billion in 2024. For the year. We're just over halfway through the year, and we've seen more than that already. So clearly there's more investment coming in cyber and funding into AI and AI security. What does that kind of start to look like? Do we start to see like old technologies that didn't work that well, they now get a new breath of fresh air? You mentioned like email or DLP.
Yeah.
Do we see, is it going to be more of the money's going towards just technologies to protect the new ecosystem and infrastructure that we're building out for AI? I'd love to get your perspectives, and to the degree that you feel comfortable, like look to the future. Like what does like 6-12 months look like?
Yeah. So I think that's really going to shape up a few different ways. So yes, old stuff that was never that great will start working better all of a sudden, or like you can achieve like maybe not a specific company, but the goals of what a company was trying to do. Like I think about DLP, that one, there was an obvious one for me. It's like you can actually detect with context what this email said or what this document was about, without having to rely on basic regex.
I was there at the beginning. I was there at Symantec and McAfee rolling out that stuff. I was did not work well.
It did not work well. You have to look at every single event inside, like real or not. So like that's a great one. That's like kind of leapfrog, and like, hey, this is the promise you did 20 years ago is now kind of true. So that's kind of nice. So we'll see lots of stuff like that. I think we'll see, more companies who are trying to build the ecosystem around it, in terms of like, well, how do because right now the challenge with like a lot of AI is the orchestration. So like, I can't have a product where every product has a chatbot. Like that's not useful.
Yep.
How do I make the chatbots talk to each other? How do I get the most out of each of these things? And then how do I make sure I can understand like kind of a workflow all the way through? So there'll be lots of stuff around securing those interactions, because companies outside of cyber are already trying to do that.
Yep.
You look at MCP or the A2A or things like that. They're trying to make things talk to each other. Systems talk to systems way more than they ever did. So every one of those kind of like trust zones and interaction points will have to be secured in some way. So that won't go away. And then I think kind of looking forward, we'll see the similar kind of view that we've seen happen with AppSec and CloudSec. It's, these are very wide buckets. AppSec probably has more category acronyms than any other, category out there. Super hard to keep up with anybody. But if you look at what they're doing, they're all solving the same problem from a different view. Like they slice like a table this way, and like, we'll solve it from this way. And then like, instead, think about it from the bottom row. We'll solve it this way. They're effectively the same, but they're philosophically different approaches to solving it. Doesn't mean that either one is wrong or right, but they're just different approaches. And so you'll see that kind of like philosophized transition of the industry. And that's why, you'll see the similar with like cloud security was like, well, let's detect configuration changes first with CSPM. And then like, well, that's kind of okay, but like, what about real threats? And what about correlating event logs? And what about looking at all these things?
About runtime. Yeah.
What about runtime? And then, you'll see that exact same kind of thing, because that's just what the market's used to. And, we're an industry that kind of relies on like what's new and what's flashy. And then it's not always the most conducive, but, we're, hype cycles are real and attention is real. And, we're very much in a broader attention economy as it is. So like whatever grabs your attention is like the thing to focus on now.
Probably a decent reason for the security community to like slow down and start paying attention to the fundamentals, go back to first principles. How does this stuff actually work?
Yeah.
Like how does the 8A protocol work? How does the MCP protocol work? What are the gaps? Because what you're saying there is like, so that we're not distracted by these hype cycles, because, and also if it is simply that we have different philosophy, like we're solving the same problem, but from like different angles.
Yeah.
It would behoove us to step back and say, like, can we understand like the root of the problem we're trying to solve? Not do we buy into this person's philosophy?
Yeah.
And I think we're going to go back to some of the traditions. Like I think the biggest thing that most people are scared of right now is authentication and identity, right? Which is a tale as old as time.
Yeah.
Right. And you have Sam Altman coming out on a podcast saying all these billions of dollars that we've invested to fix these things are now entirely obsolete. So I guess from a CISO perspective, what are the categories that are keeping you up at night? And is it some of the more traditional stuff or is it new stuff?
No, it's mostly just sort of traditional stuff. Like, I mean, you can't do anything without authentication or authorization. Like, that will always be true. And it will always need to be true for these new things. The whole non-human identity space and agent IDs and all that. They all have to have authentication points, but then it becomes a bit about permissioning after that. It's like, okay, maybe you can put, an agent behind your identity source, but then what permissions does it have? And then are you comfortable actually them using all of them? Because they will. They will use everything they can.
Authorization's a bitch.
Yes. Yeah. And so that becomes like a different kind of trust factor, but that's more like, do I trust the tech to make the right decisions? Less so like a security issue.
Yeah.
Don't provision what you don't expect to be used. Least privilege will still hold true. I think that's become chaotic, because I heard one article I was reading about it said that the future of like enterprise work is, obviously less employees in general, but each employee has like dozens, if not hundreds of agents doing things as a part of their job. So all of those require like interactions and authentication and security and trust and all these things. And that's like an incredible scale. And so that's the way that the rest of the world is heading. So that is, it's never going to go away. Yeah. Which is, I think, a big reason why Palo Alto bought CyberArk too. It's like just planning for that authenticated future of things. And then there'll still be some pretty unique problems to running AI, but most companies are not using AI. Most companies are using AI-enabled SaaS products that they buy from other people. Very, very few are running their own models. Very, very few are running things that are like that they've built themselves. Only kind of the largest of the large have like the time, the resources, and like the money to actually build that out.
Yeah, unless it's directly integrated into a product.
Yeah.
The idea of me sitting down and going like, hey, I'm going to go hire these staff engineers and we're going to go use these systems we're going to deploy to our cloud environment. Yeah. Like, for what?
Pay $100 million a year for the guys as well. Like it's it's no joke, right?
NBA money.
It's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, and the rest, it's insane. Like good for them. And do you think do you think that's going to have we talk about the cybersecurity economy with these companies being, AI-based SaaS products. Do you think that might slow the hype cycle as that starts to evolve? Or do you think that that's going to continue to be an investment point, even though they're not necessarily building their own models?
I think it'll always be a hype cycle. I think they'll continue just because the field's moving so fast.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting part is you don't always know where like the control plane of the next thing's going to be.
Right.
So you think you've got it with MCP. You're probably wrong in 2 weeks. Like just wait. Somebody else will subvert that in a different way. And in a way, the model providers like, Anthropic and OpenAI are very similar to the cloud providers. And like over time, like given a long enough time horizon, all value accrues to like Microsoft. Like, like it's unavoidable. It's like entropy of the universe. Like it may not be the best, but like that's where it heads ultimately in a lot of ways.
If that's not an economics rule, I think we should coin it right here and right now.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I think that leaves an interesting like thought exercise, which is, and I want to go back to the future of the workforce is, I don't know, some incredible people who then have agents working for them. You just ran into 22-year-old Mike who just graduated college. What do you talk to him about?
I would say buy Apple and hold it, and then buy Bitcoin is what I would say. I would say probably focus on like the cores of like technology itself. Like try to focus on not necessarily the latest framework or the latest technology itself, but just focus on like what is it that businesses are trying to achieve with technology.
Yep.
Like why the rush to the cloud, like so they can serve more customers, why the rush to like processing credit cards online so they can make more money and make it easier to transact. People want to move to that. They want to have frictionless experience. You're going to have those same kind of things with AI as well, or already are. And like there's some, AI kind of like futurists who believe that, you will eventually only talk to your AI and not even your significant other. Like those AIs will talk. You guys are just coordinating.
That's very depressing for me and very happy for my wife. She'd be like, yeah,
just talk to your AI. Yeah.
Kind of AI. I think you've probably undersold something that I think you've done incredibly well. And person from my own heart is you've built a content-driven community for yourself. Talk to me, and I think it's struck a chord with a lot of security professionals. You have a lot of people that do read your articles, case in point. What advice would you give to people? Because I think there's some people who are stuck in corporate roles that feel like maybe they can't voice themselves to the community. Like, how has that journey been for you in terms of creating a loyal community that follow you now?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And it's been a long process for sure. I think I tried to publish my first blog post probably 7 or 8 years ago, and I was still at a corporate job. And it took at least 6 months for them to allow me to publish it on my personal LinkedIn. It had nothing to do with the company I worked for. I wasn't calling anything bad. I was just saying, like, here's 3 problems I've noticed over my career that security teams struggle with. And it took 6 months. And I think, my boss didn't want me to do it at the time. He was like, yeah, you got to go talk to legal, thinking that would like scare me away. And so I did. And legal was like, well, as long as you don't disclose company secrets or whatever, we don't really care. But it took, many months for them to say that. And it was just like a circular logic of like, well, your boss has to approve it. No, your legal has to approve it. And I finally got my boss's boss to approve. And it was just a LinkedIn post. But that's what got my mind going. I'm like, and it took me a long time to write too. I'm like, well, maybe I'll just post this. Like, here's just a thought. Because I'm sure I'm like many security people who've developed lots of opinions over the years. Some of them very strong.
Yes.
Maybe some of them not grounded in reality. But so that, I would say if you were kind of in this spot today and you didn't know where to go, I would encourage you just to pick whatever medium you want to do and just write something that is like specific for you. So like, don't try to be like make the ultimate thought leader piece. Just say like, here's my own personal experience with X, and just do it right up. Doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be, super polished. It's just like, here's some things I noticed that are interesting or bad or whatever.
Yeah.
And then just start doing that. And take a bunch of notes. Like I have I use Obsidian all the time. And so I'm always like taking notes and like partial jot down parts of files. And I'm always reading a lot more stuff too. Yeah. So I'd say consume the kind of stuff like that, get ideas from people, help it like, especially outside of cyber. Because then you can always kind of tie things back to your life and your profession. Like some of the best, career kind of advice books I've ever read have nothing to do with cyber at all. And they've been good applications inside of the field. So I was thinking, like, learn how to abstract ideas like that, and then make them, personal for yourself. But then do it a lot longer than you think. Like it takes a very, very long time to do. Like I think I was writing for almost 3 years before I even had like maybe 1,000 people who subscribed to the newsletter. And I was super excited when I got to that milestone. And then it took off from there. But you have to do it a lot longer. And I think most people, kind of give up way too early on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I would say don't write for somebody else, like write for yourself. I had to do it because it helped me like formulate my ideas better. And believe it or not, I was always a fan of writing documentation. Like I'm like, this run book has to be like dialed in because we don't want to have an issue where, we don't know what to do. And so like I always prioritize that. I'm like, this has to be thorough. It has to be thoughtful. And then maybe I'm crazy for that, but
no respect. No one shows up in this industry not slightly crazy. And I think that's a really good point though about the kind of building that personal brand, but building it. I like what you're saying, like build the personal brand and with an audience of one, and it's yourself. Yeah. And I've always held this belief that I'm not special. And it's like, if something is meaningful for me and I write it, following your logic, there's probably someone else out there who's going to look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Because, we do, bell curves are real. Like we do fall into like pockets buckets and categories and patterns and biases. And so we
Yeah.
end up in a bubble, and like you can find your people if you just write for yourself.
On the flip side, you might
Yeah,
piss
true.
someone else off as well. So if you
That's
write,
true.
if you write for yourself, as long as there's a line, there's always a line. But as
Yeah.
long, if you're writing for yourself, you have to be uncomfortable that some people, you're going to find your people,
Yeah.
and you're going to find the people who are not your people as well.
I've heard it described as being magnetic, right? You attract some people, you repel other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to be
confirm.
comfortable with doing that because, especially if it's like, if it's good writing, you'll actually have an opinion.
Yes.
Right.
It doesn't have to be, it's an opinion. It's not right or wrong. But some people will just agree with that too. And then you can kind of then figure out what is it you enjoy writing about? What's kind of effortless to write about?
Yes.
Some stuff takes me a long time to write. Some stuff I write in like 2 hours, like end to end, and I forgot what day it was, and so like that's a good time. But it's that's the kind of thing, like lean into like the momentum of it as well, and like what you enjoy and like what's interesting to research or write about or just like get your thoughts out about, as opposed to like stuff that's like grating your nerves. Just because you expect to like, I have to write about X thing, or I have to write a piece about like 10 reasons why this thing is that. I think that's too much thought into it.
Yeah.
Just start writing it, and then it'll form from there.
So what's next for Return on Security? Like either from where you're putting your time and attention on that community, or again, I'm always interested to get your perspectives on where we as the cybersecurity community, our cybersecurity economy heading as well. So I'd love to kind of get your perspective on what's in the near future for both of those.
Yeah, I'm branching out more this year, trying to do more speaking, like more public speaking. Not just like I've done lots of podcasts and stuff like that, which I enjoy doing, but I've also like it's a totally different kind of like fear to like go up and talk on a podium in front of people. And it's a totally different way of like framing, because with writing, I can just, if I don't like that, I just delete it or edit it after the fact. I'm like, I didn't say that. And, but I can't do that in real life. And so like, you have to put a different level of thought into it. But I'm trying to, I guess, create a more of a discovery mechanism now for, Return on Security, because it was always slow, for me in terms of like, growth, because it was so very niche. But in the content business world, you either have to be the biggest or you have to be the nichest. You can't be
the most medium.
Medium at all. Yeah. So, and that's why like I intentionally leave other parts of cyber out of what I do, because there's people who are way better at threat intelligence or way better at security research than I will ever be. So I would just rather point to them, and then I would rather just very narrowly focus on this. And so then it's about like how do you get other people to discover that, or how do you then evolve? Like, because honestly, the cybersecurity economy was more of an evolution over the past like 4 years that I've been doing this. It kind of didn't start to form until like maybe the last 18 months or like 24 months. That this is a separate thing unto itself that's not just like transactional based. And so I'm just trying to lean into that more. And I think, in terms of like the broader like community and all that, I think there's been some positive benefit. A lot of these small conferences, or even some of the large ones, are now starting to make room for people that are not just purely technical talks.
Right.
They're making talks about EQ. They're making talks about team building. They're making talks about managerial tracks. They're making it more inclusive for everybody, which I think is amazing. And I think we should continue to do that, because most people in security are very curious, and they enjoy learning things, and so I think we can all just kind of open up our minds a bit. And so that's what I'm hoping to do with some of these talks, and like let me just drop this thought in your mind that maybe you never thought about this kind of stuff before, but maybe it helps you with your day job in some way.
Amazing.
No, I love it. Thank you so much for coming on, mate. It's been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was awesome.
Mike is the founder of Return on Security. He is recognized as the industry's first cybersecurity economist, and you've done incredible work that's really helping people think differently about the environment that we're operating in day out. It's kind of answering that question of like, what is water? Like, we're in this economy the entire time. So just thank you for the work you've been doing on this. Your work has been featured at B-Sides. Everybody should be following your newsletter on Return on Security. And then, of course, you can follow you as well on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Mike. Real pleasure.